Lonesome Report, part of Lonesome Land's podcast. I'm still a little stumbled up on how to separate the two. But this is just me and Shad talking about what's going on in the world once a week. I'm no longer at the headwaters. Oh, I'm in Southwest Iowa. Where are you, Shad?
I'm at the headwaters of Bitter Creek, Archer County, North Texas, where the wind is blowing 40 mile an hour out of the north and has been for about 2 days. And it is bitter cold, not 37 below, but we did get to 5 degrees last night with the wind chill of 20 below zero.
I asked where you were. You gave me a whole weather report. You still think you're in the coldest place in the world, don't you?
It is.
Um, So yeah, we get together once a week, talk about what's going on in the world, and we're gonna got a lot of new watchers, I believe. We should have. Anyway, after last week, we talked about DOGE. We're gonna get more into kind of where all that money is going as far as agriculture. We're gonna talk about federal lands and if they should be sold off. And we're gonna get into history because Chad wanted a history. I was thinking we are gonna have a history segment
All
on
right.
this deal. So this one is brought to you by Mundorf Heritage Beef. I
Wow.
don't know how much they're paying, but my family is now selling direct market. I don't know if I've ever done a podcast or video or anything where somebody didn't comment buy beef direct from a rancher or they comment you should be, if you're new here, I do a lot of complaining. Um and so they'd always you should sell direct to the consumer. So it's mainly my brother and nephew that are doing all the legwork. I'm not going to take any of the credit, but they hauled a couple of locker the other day. I bet they got cold. But we should. So they're taking orders now. They have some available in March that will be available in March. They're selling halves and quarters and big bundles mainly. Um, but I think clear down. He said there's a $10 or a 10 pound ground beef package in there too. So, but if you go to Mundorf Heritage Beef, .com, I believe. And then they're on Facebook and Instagram. You can see all the family history they've been posting. We got a crazy picture from 100 years ago at my family's farm. There's some guys. There's like a guy in a suit, I think, who's probably my great great grandpa sitting in the cattle pen. There's cattle. There's hogs in the pen with them, which they always used to do. And then
Yeah.
there's these ladies in fur coats in a carriage in the middle of this cattle pen. There's guys up on the roof. We think it might be like a picture taken for an ad for a feed company or something like that. But anyway,
Wow.
Mundorf Heritage Beef you can buy direct from our farm, Southwest Iowa, that we've had. We've been in this neighborhood, I guess. It's not the original, but we still do farm the original that my aunt is on. Anyway, enough of that. Back to Doge. We've had, I think, close to 45,000 views on that last video. There's a lot of interest in the Doge and what the Doge is doing, and as far as agriculture. And as far as the new stuff, one of the things, the big one that we came into last week was the Ducks Unlimited. And I went back through there to double check that, and that is really close to, I mean, almost everything. They have like over 100 entries, and it's like 2 million, 3 million, 25 million, but it is, yeah, $300 million to Ducks Unlimited. Because I was a little worried that we got that wrong. I don't think we got that wrong. I think it's real close to that $373 million is what they got. We talked about the two different websites. There's datarepublican.com, which I'm not even sure if that's the Doge team, but it's like an AI thing that somebody put together where you can put in names of stuff. And what that one is, I figured out the difference. That one is federal grants. That's like grant money that just, I think it's kind of just checks getting written and handed out. But you have to
Okay.
apply and all that stuff. The USA spending one, which we talked about, that is federal spending. So you can type in your neighbor's farm and see if he got I don't think it's showing like subsidy payments, but if he got like like what we were told when you type in cattle, just type in
Mhm.
cattle and it brings up all the businesses with the name cattle in it. And the top one that came up is Broken Arrow Horse and Cattle. They got 11.3 million in 2024. And that's out of Nevada. And what I was told is they're running what we talked about last time is they're running wild horses.
Yeah.
You got any? I was also told I at the start of these I just kind of go off on a rant and then you sit in the background.
I don't know what you need me here for, bro.
Well, I need your expert opinion.
I'm not an expert on anything, but I can sure give you an opinion.
Well, the Drummond Cattle Company, which is our favorite cook, they came up there. I think they got like 5 million bucks.
Oh yeah.
But on that wild horse deal, but that is like payments for things. So I typed into Tyson Foods on that one, which Tyson Foods still doesn't come up on the grant one, but I know they got over $100 million in that climate grant. But I typed it in that one, well, they're getting like 200, a quarter billion dollars, 260 some $1 million. But then if you look at it, they're getting paid for like school lunches. So that's like stuff, they're getting paid for actually something for a product, which is just like the Broken Arrow folks. They're getting paid for doing something for the federal government. I mean, we might not agree with it. They're just feeding wild horses. And I believe that's the same with the Drummonds in Oklahoma. Um, but if you want to get into it, and somebody told me we should put links to those websites. I'll try to put links to those websites
Yeah,
in
that's
the description.
usaspending.gov on
Yeah,
that.
usaspending.gov.
Yeah.
And so I started kicking around that, but then it's kind of like, well, this is who knows what they're paying for. Like Tyson Food provides a lot of school lunch food, So that's kind of what that is. But the grant one, that's kind of like obvious just waste, I think. And the one that'll blow people's mind this time that we didn't talk about last time, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Federation or Fund. It's USF
Federation.
Federation. So
Yeah.
it's not because there's a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Department,
Yeah.
right? Government department. This
Yeah.
is an actual like nonprofit. I
Correct.
suppose they call themselves a nonprofit. They got $1.2 billion in grant money from that's what came up on the datarepublican.com. And a lot of that's all this climate stuff. But it's like Thomas Massey tweeted out. If you are a non-government, if you call yourself an NGO, non-government organization, and all this grant money goes away and you can't exist, you're not an NGO. You're a
Yeah.
government run organization. So, you know.
But
But they're
you're
firing
talking
everybody. Have you seen a lot of that? I'm starting to see some of that.
of the firings.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
People whining.
Yeah. I mean, I have long said that this administration would separate the socialists from the constitutionalists, and that's what we're seeing because I just cannot believe what I'm seeing on social media, even among the Trump voters, the Trump voting base, about the, you know, all of the firings, all of the DOGE investigations, all of the money that has we've just been bleeding being stopped. I mean, people are angry. Even the people that say that they're conservatives, constitutionalists, that there are some really upset people out there, man. I am just blown away um, at how much we have come to depend on the federal government for our living.
Yeah.
And
And nobody, I don't, I said people are whining, but I don't like seeing anybody losing their job. I mean, it would suck for anybody. But we created the system, and you said it. You said, here's why you're here. You said it a few times ago. You said there's going to be growing pains, and this is not going to be an easy deal. But this is also something that I think pretty much every president has said when they come in. We're going to fix it. We're going to get rid of all the wasteful spending. Well, if you have a job where you're not really needed and the government is paying for that job, which I'm not saying they're all, it does seem like kind of quick just to come in and slash them all.
But isn't that what we want? I mean,
Yeah, I
that's
mean
what
that
I,
is it's what and it is what we voted for. I mean,
yeah.
truly, we it is. But like I saw this post, there's a guy, I think it's on Instagram or somewhere. He was a park ranger, and it was his life's dream to be a park ranger, and he was finally in there, but he was still in the probationary period, so he got fired and crushed his dreams. But and then of course he's got a bunch of videos of him doing great work in the parks, and everybody's wound up about it. Um,
Yeah,
which I
but
do. I feel sorry for the guy, but we are going broke. As a country, it's kind of like, and we talked about that. It's been talked about extensively. Like we can't keep doing this. And, maybe a park ranger, I don't know. Maybe we don't need as many. And it's the thing, like there's a lot of people whose life's dream has been firefighters, things like that, where there just aren't that many. It's hard to get on in some of these cities to be a firefighter. Maybe it shouldn't be like I'm not saying it's easy. Maybe it is hard to get on, be a park ranger. I don't know. But
well, there has to come a time when we have overspent so bad, Jim, that it's just mass confusion. Nobody knows where we're at. It's like taking your business over year, over year, over year, and never knowing where you're at. Well, that's where we're at in the federal government. So then there comes a time where the banker says, "Okay, stop the bleeding. We have to find out where we're at, and then we got to start over." And I think that's really what's coming, is that they're going to clean these houses. If your merit, if you have the merits to have the job, you'll get your job back. If you
right.
don't, we're going to cut that kind of garbage out, and I'm all for it. And I'm like you. I feel bad. It doesn't mean this man's dreams are over. It just means that we're going to reorganize this thing. It's like going into chapter 11 or 12 or whatever in bankruptcy, where we have to reorganize and get control of the spending and the organization part of it. Government is too big. We have to do better in that area, and I think that's where we're going. And I could be totally wrong, but I'm all for it so far.
Yeah, and I think you can come from both angles. You can say there are good people at FSA that are probably getting chopped, who, you can feel bad for them, but you can also be glad that the systems maybe getting fixed. And like
But
this
how do we?
Kevin O'Leary, you talk about the banks and somebody filing Chapter 11. Is Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank? He was on one of them shows where he says when you go into a company that's going bankrupt or a bankrupt company and you buy them or take them over, he goes, you cut deeper than what you need to, and then you come back. He's like, it's like a way that they do it. They
Well,
cut
it just makes
more
good
out.
business.
Yeah, because they're hemorrhaging money, so you have to stop that, right away, and then you come in and you find where you need things, you know.
No, I totally agree with
And
that.
the
And
government's so efficient. I mean, like the park system, maybe, there's a ton in one area and not as many in another, or, I don't know, but I think you have to get to a point where it works, and what's going on in the overall government just isn't working. So,
yeah, it's not working. And I will tell you, and I know this for a fact, there are nefarious individuals that have infiltrated into those organizations and bureaucracies. Especially, I mean, I got a call this week on the state head of a federal agency, um, and he is totally working against Trump and just dictating like you can't believe. And it sounds bad. And
the
that is
person
why,
you talk to,
huh?
you said you got a call and the person is totally dictating. The person you
Not
talk to
from
is,
that person.
oh,
No,
okay. He's
no.
he's describing something's
He's
going on.
over. Yeah, yeah. This individual is over a whole state, and it sounds like it's just a ploy to go against what the America First policy, number one. And I mean, I think there were positions created that you couldn't fire them, to go against this America First policy. And that's what we're doing, is we're cleaning out that garbage, that holdover. that's what Mindy Patterson calls them. She says they're called holdovers.
Yeah.
And those are the people that have been there forever and ever and ever and ever, kind of think they own the system and that the people should serve them. Well, the truth is that they're there to serve the people, and the fruit of what is happening, of where we're at in this nation, is because of the policies they've promoted and uplifted. That's where we have to fix it.
Yeah. And you know, when it comes to politics, they're going to try to politicize like this park ranger. You know, it's going to be try, let's here. Oh, we got something we can hurt Trump with. Let's
Well,
take this and
yeah.
run with it.
Well,
And every
what,
time. And, you know, knee-jerk reactions are always the worst reactions, right? But we're
you
hitting it right now.
you always tell me,
People, people are seeing, oh my gosh, there's
what
people
about
getting
this?
fired. Oh
What
my
about
gosh,
this?
my friend lost her job. There was this one, but I think that Defiant L's, it's on Twitter. They always post two people's tweets that like are against each other, and there's one girl who's like, "I can't believe I lost my federal job. You know, how I don't know how this department's ever gonna operate without me." And then in a tweet below it was something she had said earlier, which was like, I didn't have a meeting until 3 o'clock today and wore my pajamas all day and had to put on a hoodie for my meeting, you know. And then it was like work from home life or something like that. It's just, it's this work from home stuff is pretty wild. Uh, I don't know. My wife's a school teacher, and so they like she has like cousins that work from home and stuff, and she goes into work and is with kids from the time she's there till the time she's leave, constantly doing stuff. And then she has like these cousins that are laying out by the pool on their computer and you know, that's a little frustrating, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that whole thing's I don't know how that can continue the way it is. But anyway, what were you saying?
Well, I was thinking about that young gentleman from Missouri that everybody has made such a
Oh yeah, let's get into
fuss
that.
over. Skyler is his name, and the freeze on federal funds going out to these agricultural programs. Are they really frozen? I mean, are they
I
really
would
frozen?
think you'd hear a heck of a lot more
I
because it's
know.
not like CRP payments are frozen, right?
Right. Right. He had an equip
Yeah, so I think that
contract.
that maybe was froze for maybe a day or two, and then I
Oh,
saw another headline that said it was released.
I'm telling you what, my gosh, they have politicized that and politicized that. And then there's some guy named Will, who's a leftist Democrat guy, coming on, cutting cutting this for America First policy down and telling the Trump voters how stupid they are, and he's an ag expert and all this stuff. And I'm like, hold up, boys, hold up. I don't even know if all of this funding has been cut so far, but this kid was like, I'm not going to be able to make my payments. Well, I'm sitting here saying, if the federal government is making all your payments for you, we got a problem.
Right. Yeah, there you go. But and so what's and this is like a how old was he? If you're
Oh, he
not
said he's
familiar.
like in his 20s.
Yeah, in his 20s in Missouri, he's like sitting in his pickup making one of those videos like they're quitting paying and now I can't I'm in the middle of this project and I've already spent all this money and I'm waiting for I got to pay my bills with the checks that are coming in, and now they're not coming in, and I'm gonna go broke. And everybody got all wound. You know, it's like I just said, everything. Oh, here's something we can politicize and make and crap. But it's one guy. You would think if that was a huge problem, there'd be way more than one, right?
And
And
I
what's
don't know
EQIP
how
stand
often.
for? Environmental something?
Well, it's just a program where you can put pipelines and really increase the productive value of your place. Cross fences, pipelines, dig tanks, all that stuff. It's a partnership, a conservation partnership program with the federal government. Basically, is what
Right.
it is. And I, I don't know how the payments work, but I mean, surely the payments haven't stopped already, or if they did, he's got one from a back payment or something.
And yeah, I mean, it's
I don't
like
know.
me. Maybe he read a headline and
Maybe
sat there
had
with
a
his
knee-jerk
phone and
reaction.
yeah, which if you're waiting on federal checks to pay your bills, you're probably going to have an overreaction. You know, if you're like, "Oh my gosh, this can't happen. I got to get this TikTok put together.
Yeah, maybe.
Um, yeah, it's interesting times we're living in.
It really is.
But one thing, um, I thought of, and this will kind of get into the other topic I want to talk about, but I do feel like you can't just constantly cheerlead Trump with whatever he's doing, and I feel like there is a sometimes I feel like pulling back a little bit on the whole drill baby drill and, you know, no matter what, let's extract all the energy we can out of the country. I mean, I'm a conservationist, you know. I believe in you just hate these terms. But if you get to the root of the term, you don't want to drill. Do you want to coal mine in Rocky Mountain National Park? That's what I'm saying. Like, let's not, I'm following Corblund, the singer, and
I
they're
love
trying to coal mine in the Rocky Mountains in Canada, and he's all wound up about it. And I don't know all the details with it, but I would be wound up too if they tried to coal mine in the Rocky Mountains in the U.S. I don't want to see that. I want to see those things preserved, and I don't want to get to a point where we're so behind Trump and drill baby drill that no matter what. What? You're obviously thinking something. Let's hear it.
I'm all about drill baby drill. God gave us those
I
resources
agree
to
we should
use.
drill oil, but I also think, like, I mean, so the next topic was Mike Lee's tweet, and there was also an article in Wall Street Journal about federal lands. And for a lot of people don't realize that a large portion of the West is owned by the federal government.
Too much.
Okay, so here we go. But how do you fix that, right? Um, so Mike Lee's tweet said, "The U.S. government should never be the largest landowner in America, and it certainly shouldn't own 28% of America's land, especially while 36 trillion in debt. Keep the national parks and military bases, and maybe some of the most historically and environmentally sensitive properties. Sell the rest, not all at once, but steadily." So as to promote economic growth and enhance our government's capacity to get out of debt, or transfer it to the states, starting with those that have suffered for more than a century under the harsh yoke of excessive federal land ownership, which that state brings up one we've talked about a lot, which is Nevada, as far as the ranching community. And Mike Lee, if you don't know, he's a senator out of Utah. And I'm sure there's a ton of federal land in Utah.
There is. There
Yeah.
is.
But where I would pull back on that a little bit is how you're just going to sell it, because over the past few years, the largest farmland buyer and owner has become Bill Gates, right? So is that what we want? How does that work? I mean, it's a sticky situation. If you look at the big ranches who have sold, I mean, just north of you, Wagner Ranch, it's now owned by some I guess I don't want to really get into it too much, but guy who married somebody, one of the Waltons, the Walmart family. What's his name? Cronky?
Oh,
Cronky, something like that.
yeah,
Sold the
Cronky.
St. Louis Rams, and I got a cousin who married a guy, so he's like an in-law, but he has boycotted Walmart, which I love because he knows it's not doing good, but he's like, I just hate him so much. I'm not going to Walmart. But yeah, I mean, and then you look at the 4.6s. They're bought by all these Hollywood people. Are those the kind of people that we want to own Nevada and Utah? Or would it be better for the federal government to own it? Or would it
No,
be
it's
better for the
better.
state? You think the state should control it?
No, no government entity should control this amount of land. None. It's not constitutional. I would, people are like, oh my gosh, this country's been getting ate up by all of these people who are developing the land. I'm like, develop it. Develop it. I would rather see private individuals own every acre than have the federal government or a state government own any, because the federal government and state government are not to be in direct competition with the people. And once you have that power, the people are forgotten. So the state government or the federal government has or doesn't have limited funds. You and I have limited funds. So all of a sudden, they want that for an agenda. They can give any price that they want to do that, but you and I can't do that. So that takes me and you out of the equation, right? And that's unconstitutional.
Hmm. I know you've looked into this property rights. You're the property rights expert.
I'm
That's
not an
why we got
expert.
you on here.
I'm really not an expert at all, but the federal
Yeah,
government
you
should
are.
not own any land.
Not
And
own any
well, I'm not
national
saying
parks?
I listen. I support the preservation of the parks, but it needs to be in the hands of the people. It needs to be in the hands of the
Right.
people. I have the federal government has become so big and so powerful that the people have been forgotten. And we cannot have a constitutional republic when the people are forgotten.
But
When
how
they're
would that
served
work?
with
To put all this 28% of America, you're just going to put it up for sale? How does that work? Like in right now we have all this issue with China buying farmland and ranch land and all that stuff. What if George Soros comes in and buys everything, or like Ted Turner wants to turn it all into a buffalo preserve or
I
things
can't
like that.
say that I understand or know what that looks like totally. I'm of a,
And I'm
that
just
history.
bringing up,
No,
I'm
I
just,
get it.
yeah.
I get it. But I mean, just with my experience, you know, the state of Colorado owns so much land that we can no longer compete with those values as producers. So they're just buying ranch. It's like a little a rich rancher. He says, what they say, when is enough enough? Well, when I get the next fence line, next fence line, next fence line. And that's what's happening, and it gives them total control. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, so you can get into Colorado. How has that worked over your lifetime? They have bought land, right? They
yeah,
have bought out private ranchers and turned it over to Nature Conservancy mainly, right?
in public-private partnerships. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so that's where you're coming from. But yeah, that's it. But that's state owned, right?
Yep.
The state owns that land now.
What's the difference between state and federal?
Well, state is more, you could be more locally controlled, like which there you go, get in Colorado where the state, I mean, Colorado is a weird because they have so many, I guess, immigrants from other states, you know, and and there's such an urban corridor there that they don't really, because like Iowa, you have, I mean, you definitely have population areas, but it's throughout the state. Like Colorado, it seems like you got Colorado Springs to
It's
Fort
definitely
Collins and
it's definitely concentrated. Yeah.
and all those people, I mean, they all get out in the mountain. I mean, a lot of them do will get out in the mountains or at least the foothills and stuff. And then I don't know. Apparently, they want to see wolves out there, but but they don't really have a connection to, and like Nevada has such a strong ranching, um, community and
Yeah.
economics to where I feel like Colorado, the part of the whole population thing coming in, well, then your economy doesn't rely on agriculture anymore with all of that population. To go into, I did a podcast with Keely Cavello. Again, I did another one because her neighborhood is going to get destroyed when they take these dams out.
Right.
And she says it's going to remove a water source for 600,000 people. And I just so happened to be talking to my kid the other day who loves geography. And he said, we were looking at state populations. The population of Wyoming is like 580,000 people.
That's right.
So, like, the couple of counties in Northern California, population is the same as the state of Wyoming. And that's heavily, you know, the economics is dependent on ranching. Um,
Correct.
but yeah, I don't know. That brings up, it's a sticky situation. And that's from
It
what
is.
I'm just bringing up a concern like, oh, yeah, let's sell it. That's the whole free market thing. Let's sell it. But, you know. Sell it to who is the
Well,
problem.
I would
Because
say,
it ain't, I don't think you and me are going to be buying it.
I would say at the very least, we need legislation on the state and national level that puts a stop to more acquisition by the federal government, land acquisition by the federal
Oh
government.
yeah.
We don't
Or
need
even
it.
state, right? Like
But
what's
I say
Colorado doing?
state and national level, we need that legislation bad.
Yeah.
I just cannot continue down this road of really killing the small producer because he can't compete.
Right.
And when you have these, and it doesn't. It's just like federal land programs, grassland CRP and all that stuff. Well, when you have an individual rancher who chooses to partner up with the federal government and he gets paid to produce less on actual acreage that would not bring that lease in a free market economy, then that puts the neighbor out. He can't compete with that either, right? Because I know people that are getting $20 an acre on a grassland CRP that in a free market economy would be worth $6 to $10 an acre, right? In the West.
In
And so
Colorado?
huh?
In Colorado?
Yeah. And so when you have that, he's able to produce a calf or whatever he's going to produce off that land and gets a federal payment. Well, then those who choose not to take federal payments, that puts them out. They can't compete on that financial level.
Right.
And it's the
Same
same
with
way.
windmills and solar panels and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Correct.
But you talk about squeezing the small producer out, which I don't know how many Jack Paynes are left in the world, but if you look at him, he's running like a million acres in Nevada, and you know, if that gets all put up for sale, he's got all these BLM leases, which is a lot of what Nevada ranching is. It's just BLM leases. But if you look at his neighbors, the ranches have been bought out by mining companies. One of the big one, I think, owns a makeup company or something like that. They're just these big corporations that have bought these ranches, and then they have these buckaroos running them. But like the mining company, they bought the ranches around Jack because they needed carbon credits. And,
Yeah,
and so
I wrote down right here. That's funny.
carbon credits or what?
The carbon issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I understand that it's a very complex issue, but no more land acquisition by any government entity in my book.
Mine too. We'll
All right,
agree on that.
we can agree on that.
We should probably disagree more often. I kind of like it when we disagree. Um, what do you got on the carbon issue?
I just wrote something down on that.
I'll
So,
sell you something.
okay.
I was listening to this meat eater podcast, which I've gotten into since I spent 3 days straight on the road pretty much and was just listening. So he had a conservation guy, Theodore Roosevelt, something foundation, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and he was that guy. It was really interesting because we talk about all this DOGE money and all these federal grants to these conservation outfits, like 1.2 billion to this U.S. Fish and Wildlife outfit. But he was talking about how when you apply for money from one of those outfits to the federal government, like during the Trump administration, you'll say, okay, we want to study, how grizzly bears interact in the wild or whatever. And then if it's during the Biden administration, they would apply, we want to study the effects of climate change on the grizzly bear population. You know what I mean? Like that's how you get your money. And that's what he said. He was like, if you put climate change in your application, you're way better. It just depending on the
Yeah.
I found that to be really interesting. And you go back and if you go through this DOGE stuff, like we talked about the Ducks Unlimited. I mean, they figured that out better than anybody, I would think, that they're getting 373 million, but like, or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife
Yeah.
Foundation,
I was going to say,
um,
there's several of those environmental organizations.
that are really good at getting grants. And
Yeah.
and they figured out this climate deal was a boondoggle, and they went
Yeah.
all in on it. Um, so
Yep.
yeah,
You're
I guess that
100%
goes
right.
towards your carbon talk.
Well, that I was just thinking about the this week they had the top producer summit, the Farm Journal's top producer summit in Kansas City, Kansas, to where Brooke Rollins and Roger Marshall actually spoke. They weren't the keynote speakers, but they had what they called a fireside chat with them. That was kind of exciting for them. So I got to thinking about the Farm Journal and the Carbon uh, Solutions Program and how much money they got, you know, through the what was that program, Jim?
Climate smart commodity,
Climate Smart
$40
Commodity.
million dollars to a,
They got $40 million, and so they had this top producer summit in Kansas City this week. And to register to go to this top producer summit, the cheapest registration level was $540 to attend.
is it 1 day deal?
No, it's basically 3 days.
That's cheap compared to NCBA or
Cattlecon. Oh, but that was the bottom rung. The highest one was $1,199.
still less
Some
than
of the
that.
sponsors were Rabo Bank, of course, and Cortiva. And then there was this one called Earth Optics, and I kind of looked into it a little bit. And they're basically basically what they said is digital revolution in soil science, but they are basically trading carbon credits. So that was
Oh,
interesting.
so they're a carbon credit like a market,
Yep.
and they're one of the big sponsors for the program. So Farm Journal puts out a magazine, Top Producer.
Yep.
Um, I saw a guy tweet, and I think he was there. I think he was actually a top producer at one point, though. So he might have. I don't know if they invite all the old ones that didn't go
Well, I
broke.
can
I know
tell you,
there was a joke for a while. I think a lot of them guys went bankrupt, or some of them. They'd get named top producer, and 2 years later they'd
well, I
be
can tell you,
broke.
I think it was last year's was the Henry family out of Iowa, and you get on their website and you look at it, and I mean, it looks like a good operation, but all it is about sustainable development, sustainability, sustainability, sustainability.
Well, if you're a Farm Journal and you've been given 40 million, I mean, that's where you end up with state-run government, and it's disappointing. I
No,
mean,
I'm
I'm
talking
not
about
disappointed in Brooke Rollins because she hasn't done anything disappointing yet, but I hate to see her traveling around with Roger Marshall, who has been fighting the cattlemen for the last 5 years, and she goes to National Beef Packing. She went to that packing plant and visited there. She
I
tweeted
didn't see
out.
it.
Yeah, it was a tweet. She went to a feedlot. And I looked up to see if it was one of the U.S. premium beef feedlots, but they're not listed, so I don't think it was. It was like a county co-op deal in Kansas, and then she went to and visited National Beef too with Roger Marshall, and so he's got her ear, I guess, which is unfortunate, I think, because he's all in on Farm Bureau and NCBA and Kansas Livestock Association and all that deal.
So how is that going to work, Jim? Where you know, I realize that we have to meet the needs of everybody, but these people that have been working against the system and really against our industry by promoting themselves for our industry, how does that work? Like where she comes, what was the name of her organization in Texas?
America First Policy
The
Institute.
right, the America First Policy Institute, which is a freedom making institute. How does that work where she comes out of there and then she has to kind of make everybody happy? That seems difficult for me,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
then we get into the DOGE, and
Yeah,
USDA has their own DOGE, and she's one of her first things is she's like, I welcome him into USDA. Let's cut the fat. Um, it'll be, I mean, we don't know yet. That's the thing. Like, can she travel around with Roger Marshall and be good buddies and then come out against the beef checkoff?
exactly. That's my
And
that's
actually
like
reform the
what I was
beef
getting
checkoff?
to.
That's the $1 million question, I guess. Um, And so, yeah, I guess we could get into that. Um, there is word, as I read, so in Pro Farmer, is Pro Farmer a farm journal
Yeah.
outfit? Okay,
Yeah.
so they're a farm journal too. And I talked, or I put up a video the other day of my RCAF talk, and I talked about how Drover's magazine, which is also a farm journal, there was a magazine that had three different beef checkoff ads in one magazine.
Okay.
So if you look at these checkoff, all ag checkoff, um, they they're kind of try to control the media and control the messaging, and they're controlled by the corporations. And they're crooked. I think every year, every farmer or rancher should get. I'm going to push for voluntary. I think that's really the solution. The more I think about it, the better I like it. But who knows? But that Pro Farmer article that got everybody excited, I shared it too. I shared your post. But if you really read into it a little, what I've learned in journalism school is when you see the words likely or probably or maybe or might, those are words that mean, I mean, it's almost like clickbait, is what I felt like that article was. It's like, because if you read in there, it said DOGE USA is looking at USDA, and because checkoff contracts are through the USDA, they're likely looking into the beef checkoff. So there's no like nobody said, hey, we're looking at the beef checkoff from the DOGE team or any team. They just kind of put that together and wrote an article. And so that's where
There,
that's at.
Doge is looking at it. I promise you.
Okay. You got inside information?
No.
You just know it, which would be great. I think as I have said, anyone who looks hard at the beef checkoff and reads those authorization requests knows it's a fraudulent program. If people say it is, oh, it's not that bad, it's not that big a deal, they haven't read the authorization requests. Everybody I know who has read all the authorization requests and really studied it is adamant that it's a fraudulent program. What else you got? Oh,
I,
go back to that. National Cattlemen's Beef Association. I put that in USA spending, and it came back $668,818 for the year of 2023, and didn't show anything for last year, but it showed the $445,000 thing they got to promote EID from the USDA, and it showed another one that was 223,000. And I don't know what that was for, but they got 200, so they got over $500,000 from the federal government in 2023. National
wow.
Cattlemen's Beef Association. Yeah, I know.
Wow.
Crooked. The whole
So
deal's crooked.
yeah, I'm sitting here. I know that Secretary Rollins is in Austin today.
Well, why aren't you down there?
The only reason I know that is because I had a friend, more of an acquaintance, text me early this morning and said, "Guess who I get to meet with today?" And I'm like, "Who?" And she's like, "Secretary Brooke Rollins." And I'm like, "What? I can't even. Nobody can seem to get to her. How did you do that?" And she
Cooper
failed.
Little. Send Cooper Little over to talk to him.
There
To
you
her.
go. He's probably over there talking to her.
Probably.
Anyway, hey, here's something. What about this weather? Man, these people are suffering in the north. I talked to a Mary
These people,
Tarter.
well, you're looking at one. I'm
Well, I was
suffering.
just talking to Mary Tarter, a friend of mine. They ranch up, I think it's northwest of Rapid City, North Dakota, South Dakota.
Oh, yeah.
And she said it was 36 below zero. And I'm like, holy cow. How does that happen?
Did you tell her that North Texas is the coldest place on earth?
I still contend it is.
That's because you've never felt 36 below zero.
Let me
Although
tell
I've
you,
heard.
yes, I lived in Cheyenne, Wyoming one year where
Oh, yeah.
the wind chill at Thanksgiving was like 43 below, and my pickups wouldn't start, nothing would work. But I'll tell you, we've had here in North Texas at the headwaters of Bitter Creek, For 2 days straight, we've had probably 30, minimum 30, maximum 50-mile-an-hour winds out of the north. This morning when I got up, it was 5 degrees, and I did not want to go. And man, these cattle are humped up. I bought some cows out of the north, brought down here, and I fed them out in the open this morning. They were not interested in that. They were headed to the trees as fast as they could. But it is cold in a lot of places. In fact, I talked to Mike Calicrate a little bit ago, and he said in St. Francis, Kansas, overnight they had 16 inches of snow, and he said it was just kind of a weird deal that it dumped on it just right there, and then there wasn't very much out surrounding. But yeah, it's crazy cold weather. What are you guys at?
It's like 4, I think, when I got on here. It was yeah, I think the low was like 16 below. That might be tonight or was it last night? I don't know. It's below
Wow,
zero every night. I've heard though once you feel 10 below, it doesn't feel any
it's
colder
all
at
well.
20 or 30.
Well, if you're a Texan, like, and I'm not a natural Texan, but I got here pretty quickly. Um, Once it gets to 30, everything from there, it's all the same. It's just cold as crap.
Your water's set up for it?
No, not here, man. I unplug everything and shut everything off,
You
and
shut
then
everything off at night and then turn it on in the morning?
I shut everything off and drain the hoses. And we broke ice this morning, not out in the country, but in the pens. And then we'll have to probably break ice tomorrow morning in the country. But they said by Saturday we were going to be 75 degrees here.
Yeah, we're
Believe it,
supposed to be 50 on Monday. So
crazy.
just hold on, people.
It'll change.
Just hold on. All right, Shad. You said you wanted history. We're going to do something
Let's
different.
do some history
Here's a
today.
little surprise for you because you said we need to talk about history every time. I want to have like a history segment,
Okay.
and you can sponsor it. I'm going to have my media kit out this week. Sponsorship rates. This one could be sponsored by Mundorf Heritage Beef or Antelope Mesa. You want it sponsored by Antelope Mesa?
I'll sponsor some Antelope Mesa. Yep. Antelope Mesa beef. Yep.
How do people buy that from you?
They call me up or text me and they say, "Hey, can you put me a bundle worth $250 together?" And I said, "Yes, I'll have it delivered tomorrow." Or some little old lady in town will say, "Shad, I need 2 packages of ground beef tonight." And I said, "I'll bring them to you tonight."
Right.
That's how we do it.
Which is great. So that leads me into that's a great sponsorship. So Mundorf Heritage Beef will ship nationwide, but if you want to, I guess I shouldn't steer people away. Once we're sold out, which I mean, all these places will sell out. We don't have an endless supply because we're not Tyson Foods. That's the thing. What's the RCAF's directory? USA Beef dot.
USAbeef.org.
Yeah. So if you
Yeah.
want to find somebody local,
Yeah.
once Mundorf Heritage Beef sells out, go to usabeef.org. You can find somebody local,
I
right?
really like that name, Jim. Mundorf Heritage Beef. I like that.
Well,
Sounds
he's
good.
been working with some marketing people, I think. I don't know.
Good.
But so I got into this. Trail Drivers of Texas, we talked about,
Oh, best
right?
book ever.
So I thought we'd start there because one thing that bugged me is I grabbed this book, Trail Drivers of Texas.
Okay.
Here it is. It's this thick. There it is. And I just opened it up to a page I dog-eared and I read a quote in here. Where you going? Oh, you got your version. Oh man, you're hardcover. And that's the difference between you and me. You're fancy.
Come on now.
I'm poor.
What page did you open it up to?
416. I don't know if our pages will be the same if we have different editions, but I read this quote, which was in those days, every waddy had 2 crooked irons attached to his saddle and a pocket full of matches, and the maverick that got away was sure enough a speeder. And then I was like, oh, that was a great quote. And then we just moved on. And later on, I was thinking, if you are not that familiar with history and the history of the cattle industry, that'd probably sound like a foreign language to you. You know what I mean? Because in those days, every wadi, which wadi, How would you define a wadi?
Well, a wadi is a cowboy, and the reason they had, extra irons was because
I'm
they.
not to the irons yet,
Oh, okay.
but I was gonna say the first place I ever heard the wadi when I was a little kid, we watched True Grit. We talked about True Grit on the last one too.
Yeah,
But he says if I ever, I'm pretty sure I might be combining two different quotes, but I'm pretty sure like Rooster Cogburn says, if I ever meet a Texas waddy who hasn't drank out of an old hoof print, I'll buy him a Daniel Webster cigar. I'm pretty sure that's how it went. Which meaning some old Texas cowboy who hasn't been so thirsty that he would drink out of a mud puddle, pretty much, a hoof print with water in it. And then I think the Texas guy says, and I was glad to get it, or something like that. But go ahead with your crooked iron. So the next part is they had two crooked irons attached to his saddle.
that's right. Because when they were riding the range, there'd always be Maverick calves, and they'd
What's a
rope the.
Maverick? There you go.
Well,
You got
it's
to
a
define all this stuff.
a Maverick calf would be either a calf. Well, a Maverick calf is a calf that didn't get worked, right?
Unbranded.
Unbranded. That's right. And so they build their fire and brand with those crooked irons whatever brand needed to go on that Maverick calf. However, crooked irons were also associated with um, rustlers, cattle rustlers that were riding the range. And a lot of those, they hem up in these arroyas. And because when the range was open, not all the cattle got gathered, right? And so there'd be these maverick calves, and sometimes they'd turn into maverick cows and maverick bulls, right? But if there were rustlers on the open range, they would they'd grab those. And sometimes they even grabbed branded calves, stole branded calves, which was often, and they would brand those calves and they would change the existing brand on that calf. And the only way to know that that calf had a changed brand was to slaughter the calf and skin that skin, and that was the only way you could know that it was a double. There
You
was
could
a
see it on the inside? Oh,
yeah,
I didn't know that. Here,
double
I got a lesson.
double scar on the inside. Yes, sir. That's how.
Hmm.
And so that's how they did it back in those days. And really, I think to this day, Wyoming is still the only place in the United States, only state in the United States that can hang for horse thieves and cow thieves
Hmm.
legally. Yep.
Well, off of that, I'm pretty sure it became, I don't know if it was ever like illegal on the books, but like if they caught you with a crooked iron on your saddle, eventually, like, in the early days, it was kind of just in Texas, they would, like he said, in those days, every wadi had two crooked irons attached to his saddle. Because
Yeah.
coming out of the Civil War, there was just all these wild cattle that were pretty
Yes.
much unclaimed. And so what guys did who actually built empires, like the Shanghai Pierces and those kind of people, they would just go down and gather as many cattle as they could and brand them and
That's right.
then drive them north. But then they would have their herd too that they would leave down there branded.
That's right.
But eventually it got to where all the cattle were claimed, and if you had a crooked iron on your saddle, they would hang you if they
That's right.
found you, or even just a straight piece of iron. And so what you could do with a crooked iron, like a lot of them were, they would have a straight one and a J or something like that, and then you could make all kinds of shapes. And in a lot of like they talk about probably the most famous brand is the Running W, the King Ranch one.
Yeah.
But if you think about like 4.6s, all of those kind of brands, it's really hard to alter. That's why they would pick, that guy's name was King. Why would you pick a W, running W?
Right.
It was because it was just almost in hard, you would definitely notice it if it was altered.
Yeah.
But then, you know what I figured just a few years ago? One thing that always stumped me, I can't remember what it's called. There's a Charlie Russell painting of, I think it's called the Cinch Ring. And there's a guy, if I can find it, maybe I'll put it in the video. There's a guy, one of the guys has two sticks in a cinch ring over a fire, and they've got a calf um, roped behind him, and
Hi,
there's
Dad.
another guy who's there about to shoot the guy that has the two sticks with the ring. And I was always wondering, like, what the hell? I never really put it together, like as a kid, but the other day, not too long ago, it's been a few years but I'm like, oh, they would carry, and I read about this at one point. They would carry a spare cinch ring and sew
Yes.
it into their clothes or something, which
Yes.
was a circle, and then you could just turn that
Yeah.
and draw brands.
And that's why they call it a crooked iron as well,
Yeah,
because it would have a hook on it where they can
right, like a J, yeah.
write
But
whatever they
yeah, so
write.
and so that painting, which a lot of people don't realize that everything that's going on there. The guy was heating up a cinch ring off his horse's cinch, which is a saddle piece, and then he was going to draw a brand on that calf, which means he
Sure.
was stealing that calf, and the other guy was going to shoot him for it.
That's right.
So that's pretty cool.
Well, let me tell you a little family history. Kelly and I, my
Here we
sister,
go.
we were talking about it just yesterday. Um, Back in the mid '80s, on this box T ranch that we had, uh, it was a long way across that thing, and we were little kids. And dadgum, one day we had to move these cattle like 16 miles, 12 to 16 miles. I don't know how far it was across there, and we moved them, got them moved across there. And of course, in those days, we there wasn't a trailer following us, and you couldn't pull a trailer through that sandy stuff anyway. You had to ride back, right? And we moved those cattle over there, and it got up to about 104, 5, 6, somewhere degrees, and we had drank all of our water. And so, man, we were thirsty, and I told my dad, I said, "I'm going to drink out of that tank," and he says, "No, no, you're not going to drink out of that tank." I said, "Yes, I am. I'm that
How old
thirsty."
were you?
Oh, I was probably 10 or 12 years old. And he said, "Shad, I'm not going to let you. You'll get an amoeba, right? And an amoeba will kill you." Well, so anyway, Kelly was there. It was me and my dad and Kelly and I think Christy, another one of my sisters. We had to ride back. Well, uh, the ranch manager, we seen him coming from across the prairie, and Dad said, "Let's go see." And he had a flatbed trailer on. And when he got to us kids was so thirsty, and I said, "Man, do you have any water?" And he goes, "Yeah." He says, "I don't have any water, but I have ice." And us kids, we loaded up on that ice. And I said, "Man, I wish we didn't have to ride all the way back across there." And he goes, "Jump them horses on this flatbed and we'll go on home." And so us kids, we all jumped, and Dad, we jumped them horses on that flatbed trailer, and he hauled us across that prairie. And
You
those
were
horses,
standing on there holding them?
yeah, we were just standing on there holding them, and those horses were never so happy because it was
Oh
it was
yeah.
super hot that day, and we had moved them dadgum cattle, and of course they go everywhere. You trail them, and those horses were as happy to see that trailer as I was to see that ice. We were
That's
just
pretty good.
talking about it yesterday.
Yeah, we'll have to get into some of your stories. I like that one. I like that one about that bobtail truck. We'll get in that some other time
Yeah,
that I heard. But anyway, trail drivers of Texas. I was gonna maybe, hopefully people like these. Like I've got all these dog ear. We found ourselves in possession of $8,000 and started out without a dollar. But any old trail driver who found himself rich in Abilene, Kansas in 1871 knows the rest.
women and booze.
Drink and gamble, going off to town like just to drink it. Oh, we talked about Lonesome Dove, so I had some time to go through here.
Yeah,
Um,
if
Louis
I
D.
ever, huh?
So I found in the back there's an index of names, and I just went through kind of there's no Spoon, so I didn't find Jake Spoon. I found Louis Dietz, and he was a foreman for the Blocker brothers. And if you know cattle trailing, the
John
Blocker
Blocker.
brothers were big time in running herds up the trail. But all these names were really random, and they weren't people who'd written in the book. They were just random names that kind of popped up, and they were within 50 pages of each other.
They were.
All
you're
these
exactly.
different names. So Louis Dietz, Captain C.D. McCrae,
Yeah.
and he was just some guy who died. He just said he died of something in Galveston or something, like just random people, but they're names that I think he heard and stuck with him. And then there's Captain T.P. McCall. So it wasn't
It
Woodrow
was.
F. Call,
Yeah.
Call, but
Yeah.
this guy's Captain T.P. McCall, which he probably didn't want McCrae and McCall, so he went McCrae and Call. I bet. And all within 50 pages. It's almost like he opened up the book and just read for a while and three names came up and
Well,
he
I
picked them.
mean, it's no doubt that this book inspired Lonesome Dove.
Yeah. That, I'm sure the Charlie Goodnight story and him bringing Oliver Loving back to his ranch had something to do with it, but Oliver Loving died in New Mexico, like the east
Correct.
side of New Mexico. And his ranch is on the west side of Texas. So it wasn't like going from
His ranch,
Montana.
yeah, his ranch, which I should have taken you there, is 20 miles east of my house, right here on the same highway, Oliver Loving.
East of your house?
Yes, it's just east of Olney, about 10 miles,
Oh,
12
I
miles.
thought it was further west.
No,
So he's buried there? Can you see his
no,
grave?
no, he's buried in Weatherford
Oh. Hmm. Why is he buried down there?
because that's where they wanted to bring it. He wanted to come back to.
Oh, okay.
But his ranch, and he had a ranch also south of Possum Kingdom Lake. That, and you come over this hill down into this valley on Highway 16, and that is the most beautiful valley you've ever seen. It is picturesque, and it just reminds you of the 1880s. But his main ranch was right up the road here, and there is a historical sign there, and there's a barn, the original barn with his brand, his Turkey Track brand on there.
Hmm. I should have went. I'd love to see that. I've been to Goodnight's grave.
I'll take you there next time you come. Love
But I
to.
mean, that's how the whole story goes too. It's like people want to say that it's Charlie Goodnight, Oliver Loving story. It's not. I mean, it's based on that. But if you look at, I always thought Charlie Goodnight, if you look at his personality, it's Woodrow and Gus together. Like Charlie Goodnight was a philosopher, man of philosophy, as Gus would say. But
Yeah.
Woodrow was like the opposite of that. He was just hardworking, only wanted to get things done. And Charlie Goodnight was both.
Well, but Charlie Goodnight was not a funny man. He was not
No.
a
Yeah, that's
person.
true.
He was not a personable guy, and you know that if you've ever been to his home that sits on the edge of the Paladero Canyon there at Goodnight, Texas.
Yeah, I've been
Um,
there.
he built his home, and his office is a little 6 by 6 room with a door to the outside. And when his wife said, "Why are you putting your office like that off the living room?" He said, "Because I don't want cowboys coming in and loitering, basically, and visiting and loitering. I just want to pay their wages and get them back out." He was a serious man. He's a businessman.
Well, I think I heard a story. I thought we talked about this before because the Adaires, which was the JA Ranch, they were
Yeah,
the ones who put up the money and he did the work. So that's how they were partnered up. And they were
correct.
in that house one night eating dinner or supper, and one of the cowboys came in and he pulled him up a chair and got him like Charles was like, "Come on in and eat with us." When he sat down, the Goodnights or the Adair's, at least the wife at least got up and left because she didn't eat with the help. You know,
Oh,
they were these aristocratic Europeans
yeah.
who, this guy's a worker on the place. We're not going to sit and eat with him. They ate in the servants' quarters.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think Charlie Goodnight had that kind of attitude, but he
No,
did.
for sure it wasn't
He was
him.
a businessman through and through. I mean, he made great use of his time, and there was no jacking around at all.
Yeah. Let's hear your
I,
poem.
okay, this comes from the Old Trail Drivers of Texas book, and it's called "The Old Trail Driver." May his life's future pathway with roses be strewn, whose thorns have all been pruned away. May sunshine abide when its shadows have flown, is the blessing I wish him today.
All right. There's another one in there, I think. It's called Eat the meat and save the skin. Turn up your plates and let's begin. I
That's good.
feel like we should have another segment on here about pop culture where I ask you stuff about pop culture.
I wouldn't know
That should
anything
be the
about
next. I
pop
know
culture.
that's what's funny about it. You have no idea about any of it. But here's my favorite character um from a trail driver. Oh, it's out of focus. RG Dick Head. The subject of this sketch, generally known as Dickhead. He was born in Saline County, Missouri, April 6, 1847. That was his name. I'm sure RG was Richard something, and they called him Dick, and his last name was Head.
Yeah.
It says, where is it? Mr. Head camped a herd of cattle on the spot where the city of Wichita, Kansas now stands when not a white man resided there, but as many Indians as there are now white inhabitants.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. This book is full of characters,
I've
including
always hoped
Dickhead.
I've always hoped that the day I died, the Lord would take me back to those times just to let me experience it for
Yeah.
a
I
few hours.
always wonder how long it would. Everybody says they want to go back there. I always wonder how long they'd be back there before they regretted it.
Pretty
When they're
quick.
sick in bed or using the
Well,
outhouse
or just, you
or
think
when it's 10 below in North Texas and you're in a shack,
there's
no insulation,
well,
nothing
there's
but a wood
stories
stove.
in this book, man. There's stories in this book. They started them out. They trailed them north, and a norther hit in northern Texas. That blue norther hit, and obviously we think of our animals and our horses being in good shape today. Like a horse wouldn't die overnight because they're in good flesh. But back then, those horses were used and they were not in good flesh. And there were several when they hit, they camped bedded down on the Brazos River. A norther come in the middle of the night, and by morning, several of the horses had died from exposure. Right, that wouldn't happen today because of the flesh of our animals. But back then, it wasn't like that.
Yeah. And the other thing is, you know, there wasn't any weatherman either. There was,
No,
and they didn't know, like they didn't know what certain things was. And one of my favorite stories, there's a guy in there, and he said this lightning storm came, and they used to talk about how the lightning there would be blue balls on the tips of all the cattle's horns, and because that lightning would jump. I think it's in Lonesome Dove. They kind of show that in the stampede scene.
it is.
The lightning would kind of jump and travel across their horns and stuff. And the one guy wrote in this book, he said, I thought the world was going to end, so I got off my horse and laid down and got ready for the world to end, got ready to die, or the world to. He thought it was the apocalypse during
Yeah,
one of them lightning storms.
yeah.
And I mean, that's just how it was. He never knew what was coming.
Well, I wasn't a part of it, but one time my dad and my sister in the fall were gathering a big pasture. This pasture had 17,000 acres in it. We run about 1,400 yearlings in there. And so they started early one morning. They got that whole herd back to the west side, and they were starting to push those cattle through a gate. And a thunderstorm was brewing and had come up. And they had gotten them started through the gate. It was just my dad and my sister Kelly, and they're both good hands. And Kelly said, "Dad, we're in trouble here because it started to hail a little bit, and pretty quick, lightning hit out there and spooked them cattle." And Dad was like, "Get back around them cattle, get them." So they got them as close, and I don't think it was a deluge of water, but it was a little bit of hail and lightning and stuff. And that lightning got to popping around there, so they took their saddles off and they got hunkered down along a windbreak. And Kelly said, lightning hit that windmill. It was at a windmill. Lightning hit that windmill, and she said, just like in Lonesome Dove, that shock, that static electricity went across that herd of cattle, just right across their backs, and it just turned them all blue. And she said, nobody would ever believe me, but she said, that actually happened to me. But I never got to see it. So
Like blue light. was on them.
Yeah, it's just all it is static electricity,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's grounded. The windmill is grounded, but that's dry climate, so that static electricity just traveled across those cattle. And she said it spooked them, and I think they got them all moved that day, but that was a pretty big deal, right?
Spooked the
Good
cattle or
support.
spooked her?
I think it spooked all of them.
Right. Be a scary situation out there.
Yep, out on the plains.
All right, buddy. See you
Okay,
next week. Mundorf Heritage Beef.com.
that's right. Be well.
Adios.